Hi everyone, thanks so much for joining Salpo's Plan Your Projects to Perfection webinar. Today we're going to be looking at delivering your projects so that they're planned and executed, whether they're simple or complex, so that you can deliver them on spec, on time, and within budget, and also just get the visibility that you need across the team. Let's get started. When you log into Salpo, you're going to have your dashboard, and this is kind of the great ultimate end goal of what you're going to be looking at in the system to get that pure full visibility. So if you have a bunch of tasks scheduled for yourself, or if you're overlooking tasks assigned for a specific project or a whole team's sets of tasks. So if you're the project manager running the project department sort of thing, then you can look at the whole team's projects just to get a gauge of what the team has assigned to them right now regarding resource allocation and things like that. So you can look at things like tasks on the dashboards, look at the dispersion of where your projects are based on their status, like seeing how much is in completion, how much or is not in completion, how much is about to be due. You can create different widgets like show me all of the projects that are scheduled this year and their current status, or this says events here, which is another module type that you can have in Salpo. But really you can create these different widgets based off of the reflection of what your role is, so that when you log in, your dashboard reflects the immediate needs of what you're needing to see in your project status, so that you can continue moving them. And you may have other different types of roles and hats that you're wearing in the organization, so you may want a mixture of types of things, or as different projects become more prominent or urgent, you may want to move these different widgets up your screen just to redesign it so that it reflects that urgency a little bit more based off of what your focus needs to be for that time period. So the screen is adaptable. You can customize it completely to your own requirements, and each Salpo user has their own dashboard so that they get to design it based off of their preferences as well. So first we're going to look at clearly defining your objectives and any important contacts and resources for each project. So just to take you through a typical use case, let's say I have a contact called Wordware in my Salpo system. And I've added the contact, we've tracked notes, gone back and forth, we've qualified them as an opportunity, and we start tracking that opportunity and creating it. And then this might be my list of the opportunities I've had against this customer. Well, then when I click and go into one of their specific opportunities, I can track all the different products and things that we've associated with them on all these different tabs, who their associated contacts are. But then when it comes to actually executing on that one sale, so let's say everything went well and we've now won that sale and this is a true customer. Now we need to start acting on how do we apply these projects and how are we executing on these different sales. So what I've done in Salpo is create this module called projects. So this is where I'm tracking that component. And what I'm going to do and how I would do that is come under this blue add drop down option and click on project here and just choose that standard option. It then allows me to create a new project right here from within the opportunity. And the project window modal will pop up. I can title it as something specific. Right now the name that I'd used previously is execute on sale install. And then I have some additional data points that I'm looking to collect and store against this project. So things like the project type, project description, the owner, what it's related to, the start and end dates, completion percentage, billing status, the overall status, the stage of the project. I might have if it's an internal or external project, and I might want to start looking at different things like estimation, so that we can track scope creep and really assigning and defining how many days are going to be allocated to this. So maybe I want a formula field to calculate what's the difference between the start date and end date, and did we get it resolved within that time or not, or how many days. Maybe we have an end date, but then we have a third date field that says true end date or completion date. and then I want to do a calculation between the difference of the proposed end date and then the actual completed end date. I can start building out fields that once I identify the types of projects that I'm going to be creating and using in the system, I can really start defining those fields to reflect what's required. Because if I'm, let's say, baking a cake, I'm going to have different stages of that cake, and that I have to buy the ingredients, I have to make sure I have the right appliances, I have to, like some cakes these days have mechanics involved with them, but then there are other cakes that are sheet cakes that might not have, other things involved. So like lights and fireworks or anything. So the materials required for each some of those cakes might be different. So executing them is going to be different and tracked differently, and the time allocated for each one of those. And the fields that I'm using might be different as to what stages those are all at. So the stages for building a cake might be something like putting the icing on, or buying materials, putting the icing on, baking the actual cake, building out the decorations, doing the mechanic components. There might be those types of values within the stage field. But then if I'm an IT developer or a marketing company, I'm going to have different types of fields that then reflect my current needs. So in an IT environment, my project types might be, is it in design? So we're doing the initial scope and projections and wireframes, and then we're taking it into development, or the different types of stages that you might go through there. Or the project type might be, are we designing something for an organization? Are we developing an app for them? Are we doing their pay-per-click type digital marketing? Or are we just being an IT solutions provider? So or is this an internal project? So you might have different types of things that you're tracking and different types of projects. It doesn't have to be solely one type of executed sale component. And by defining all that information up front, it gives you a bit of power at the end to start reporting and filtering by it. So if you wanted to start looking at, well, how many IT projects did we do last year? Is that an area of focus for us? Or maybe we only did a couple of IT projects, but they brought in the most revenue for the organization. So maybe we want to start focusing our marketing efforts on doing those IT projects, because they're what really is funding all the ability to work on all the other projects. So that information really does become, it helps you because the execution of these types of projects become more apparent in what's benefiting the stage. If there's any bottlenecks or holes in this process, you can start using those components or these fields to start really tracking and seeing where that information is. So in defining all of this information, I get to define my objectives. And then once that project is created, I can start connecting my important contacts and resources. So if Wordware was that original customer, but I might also need to start knowing, well, who's that site manager? Who am I going to be working with and building out these projects? Who are my suppliers, or who are the engineers I have assigned to this project? And in order to assign all my different connections, is what they're called in Salpo, I'd come back to that add drop down, because now I'm on the sale or the projects profile page. I've now moved from the opportunities profile page to the projects profile page, and now I'm just going to start adding in contacts, and I can start adding in who they are and what they're doing, just using this standard connection option. And it's going to ask, well, what is their role? And I get to manually add in what the type of role is and how they're why that is an important contact associated with this project. And any other additional resources that we have, you can define in there as well. So the next thing, now that this project is set up, we know what we're doing, we know when it's done, its current status, what's required, but now we really need to start monitoring and setting milestones so that everyone knows those deadlines and what needs to happen within the project. So you're going to start doing that just really by adding in communications to the project. So you're going to come to this add communication component or feature, and it's going to open up our communication window modal. It does re-navigate the page to our communications dropdown. So you were originally on the overview one, and you now see that it's moved to our communications dropdown. And what you're going to do within here is start titling out your different milestones that you need to have completed. and different tasks. So let's say I have a task of scheduling the first kickoff call. So I can just title it. It's going to be a call. If I want to change any different methods in here, I have the ability to do so. You can also create a custom method. So if this was a project task, and you wanted to create that as a specific type of method to track the activity, you could do so. So like an example here is we have audit or development time. So if you are an IT company and your project is building out a website, you may want to start tracking how much time your developers are spending on these different projects, and then do a compilation of that later to see, did we define the different resource quantities? Like, did we allocate enough time, or did we allocate too much? So are we underselling or overselling what we're available to do? If I want to just put in a note here, maybe project summary, I can leave this communication as is with a start and end date that is current or historical, and that would go into the system as just a standard communication. If I want to start scheduling tasks, though, I need to use this date picker and project something into the future. So this now creates a task, or makes this communication available as a task. And you'll see that instead of having where I can pick and choose any name in here, like a search function, I only get a list of my active contacts within the system. Sorry, not active contacts, active users. So as I, as the active user, will default here, but then I can pick and choose any contacts that are associated. So if I wanted to say that this is for WordWare, I can add that contact in. If there's another internal user that I want to add into here, I can start creating and adding the attendance of who's going to be required to attend this event. Also, as soon as I forward date this, it populates a reminder for me, so I can have an email reminder or not. I would say typically customers do end up deselecting this because they are in Salpo getting their reminders, communicating with their internal staff using this via these communications, just sending each other notes and things. So I'd say most people don't end up using the email reminder, but it is there. And if that's what works best for you, let's say you're out on the road and you need to see that email reminder pop up. I can put any descriptive notes in here and attach any files or links if I need to. And also, now that this is a scheduled task, it's going to sync directly to my synced calendars. You may only have Google or Office 365 connected, but if you don't want it to connect into your calendar, you just deselect that and then hit save. And that's how you're going to start adding different communications into your system to start tracking tasks. If you don't want to be adding communications and tasks like that, another really great way of setting up milestones and tracking deadlines are creating other projects, so other dependencies. So if I wanted to add a project within this project, I just use this standard component. Again, come to that add drop down, pick a project. So now I have other projects connected to kind of a parent project. So that could be a field that's over here on the right side of the screen is this a dependency project or not? So let's say I have a main parent project or a story or an epic or kind of other typical terminology used in a project like this in IT and things. Then I might have some dependencies underneath of that where, so like let's say if we're doing a website build, I might have other additional dependencies or milestones underneath of that. That might be like, we have to get the images, we have to pick and choose which hosting websites we're going to be using. Like there might be a bunch of different little steps or dependencies in order to complete the master project and say that that's completed. So you can create different fields on the right side of the screen to track that, and then define what it is a dependency of, or which is the parent and child. And so one way of doing that is connecting then this project, and I'm now creating a dependency. So if I wanted to create this as a new project, when I'm filling out those other data, this project type could be, again, like IT or design development, and pick that, but I'd have another drop-down field option that might say dependency or master. And that information would just be stored there. So then when I come to this master field, this kind of master project or the epic, then I would see a list of all of the different projects associated underneath of it. And I can see which the stage of that status is right on this screen as well, just by viewing the different columns and the information that's available in there, which is just a great way to really get visibility on where your projects are, who's working on them, the status, making sure everything is on track and on schedule so that you can maintain that visibility and expectations with the clients and customers. And the next one is just kind of looking at doing that sort of thing on a larger scale. So if I'm not looking at this specific, the specific projects profile page and looking at their dependencies, I might want to look at all of our overall projects. So it's not just that single view. I'm now looking at it on a grander scale. So I can start tracking all of my projects processes and managing any potential scope creep across all of them. So if I won't come to my projects list view page, which I get to just by clicking on projects in the main header bar here, then I'm going to see a list of all the different projects that we've created in the system. And the kind of easiest way to get visibility on that is using the column chooser, which was just like what we saw on the profile page a moment ago. And now I can pick and choose all the different fields that I want to see available in this raw data table. So essentially that's all this is just a list. If you want to think about it as like an Excel spreadsheet, this is just the rows of all the different projects that you have in the different columns. And so we're just defining of those fields that we had created against the projects, which do we want to show within the column view. So then that way I get to see, show me everything that's active, the completion percentage, who's the project owner and working on it. So you really can then get that visibility. Let's say you have a ton of projects listed here, as well as those milestones and dependencies, and you need to start filtering it out because you want to look at a specific project owner. You really want to see, well, what's Natalie got going on right now? We've got this new project coming in that we've just won. I want to see where she's at with all of her projects because I need to start looking at resource allocation. I can start applying these different more drop downs and saying, well, show me everything where the project owner is Natalie. So we can start applying some of these filters. Update that information, and it's just going to do a quick refresh and say, oh, yep, those are both for Natalie. But then I might need to say, well, show me everything that's under 100% complete. So if I wanted to say completion status, and I want to say it, I can use the less than, greater than, equal to then start saying, show me everything that she's still working on that's not completed. Or even applying additional fields like stage or status if it's active or inactive. So if it's an active project, start applying and looking at those ones. Because if something's maybe the completion percentage didn't complete, but then the actual overall project didn't complete as well. I mean, that shouldn't ever really be the case, but maybe, the customer ran out of money, or, there could be a bunch of different reasons, I guess, why the project wouldn't complete through. But it's another way of filtering down to say, making sure I'm looking at only Natalie's active projects and then the ones where the completion percentage is less than 100. And then now I can get a better visualization on what is she still working on? Does she have time to take on this new project? Or is there a better resource that I could assign to it? Because maybe if everything's at 0, right, it's going to look like, oh gosh, no, she's got a lot going on. But if everything's at like 90%, she might be at the wrapping up stages and definitely able to take on another project. So it's a great way to kind of apply and filter down this information. And instead of just looking at internal resource allocations, you can really use these fields to get visualization on where your projects are. So if I wanted to look at something like all my end dates, well, how many projects do I have that are about to complete this month? Do I need any more? Or maybe I want to look at the start date. Do I have any upcoming projects? Maybe it's coming up to the winter holidays and I want to make sure that we have enough of our skeleton holiday crew around to ensure that all of our projects are completed on time and that there's no scope creep or things get dropped during the holiday season. So it's really a great way, again, to then track that progress, manage creep, and your resource allocation. Next is going to, I've been referencing a bit of these projects that when you're trying to execute on the sale. But when you're building out these project modules, it doesn't have to be only projects where you're executing on the sale. You may have internal projects that you need to track as well. So if I'm doing an office revamp, maybe this is something that the HR team is instead using versus the development team and project managers. This module could end up being used across the board into different departments, or maybe even something like finding a CRM system. You want to create a project like finding out your CRM system. You say, oh, we're vetting Salpo. This is one of the ones we found. We're going to schedule a demo reminder for us of when we're going to do that. Maybe schedule or fill out some fields to say when the trial of your Salpo account is expiring. But the overall project, though, you might have an end date of when you need to have that firm decision made so that you can start implementing your new CRM system, getting training, the system build, work with the Salpo onboarding team, and anything like that. So it's really, this project can be used across your internal departments as well as executing it for customers, executing on those sold projects for customers. So it's just another cool way of really using this module to its fullest potential. Next, we're going to have a look at automating your tasks and alerts to stakeholders and resources. So Salpo has a feature called business rules, and really that's just our automation. And the easiest way of doing it is just creating your rule and definitely putting a description in. When you have all of your different rules outlined, if you don't have a description next to it, but you've used the same name, it can get confusing as to which rule you're clicking into. So making sure you have a description of what this rule really is about and what it means is important. You get to define which module and fields are going to be impacted. So here I've said when a project is progressing through the different stages, alert the account owner. So let's say Natalie was the account owner on the sales or the projects that we were looking at. And so every time the team that's working on executing what was sold moves the project through to another stage, even if they move it back a stage because maybe it's gone into QA, but then it's failed QA and has to go back to development, I want to be alerted. I want a notification to see what's taken place and when it's all happening. So this is when a project progresses through the different stages, alert the account owner. So this is, I've just defined that the project's going to be, or the module is going to be a project. And I want to say when a specific field is updated and it's regarding that stage field. And so then it's saying, well, what conditions do you have? And even though I'm looking at when the stage field is updated, so anytime it's updated, I only want updates to come through for active projects. If the project has been completed and is now archived in our system, there aren't going to be changes made to that project, but even if there are, I don't want to receive alerts to that. I just want to be managing my active projects. So I've put in an additional condition here so that I don't get notifications on everything. And I've also said when I want to be alerted 1 minute after the event has been selected. So pretty much immediately. As soon as that field's changed, I want a message letting me know what's taken place. And then this is where I've defined what that action is. So I've just created a scheduled communication so that it comes through as a task to me, so that it is something that really does draw my attention to it. It's not just a note that comes through that maybe I take a look at and forget. I want it to be a task where I can mark it off and say reviewed, understand why, approved, anything like that. And then I save this. So now every single time I'm on one of these project pages and I change the stage from one status to another, or from one value to another, it's going to send me an automatic alert into the system. So that it will end up looking like this scheduled task. This scheduled task then shows up on this project's profile page, but it will also show up in my to-do list, my task list, that we saw when we were on the home page here. So this main master task list, that new automated task would schedule into here as something of that I have to do and follow up in. So it's a really great way to start automating those components so that you're not having to manually kind of do things over and over again, or reactively go into the system and check for something. This is a great way of being proactive about getting fields updated, scheduling tasks for yourself or other team members, alerting other team members. It just really helps take some of that manual effort that goes into managing the project out so that you have more time to focus on executing it. So lastly, we're going to take a look at reporting on the accuracy of time and resource quote estimations. So jumping back into the projects list view page, this is where you're going to be doing a lot of that reporting components. And this is also where you end up doing the comparison of dates and times. So right now I have my end date in here. So let's add my start date, and you'll see that this table changes as soon as I add in any of these additional columns. But let's say my start date and end date, I have 2 days in between here to complete this project, but maybe it ended up taking me 3 days. And then maybe I noticed the next time it's taken me 3 days as well, but I'm only estimating and communicating to the client that it's going to take 2. So I'm kind of always falling behind task on that one. So then this would just be great at visualization for the team to say, actually, if this typically takes us 3 days, we need to start quoting 3 days, not just 2. So it's a great way of seeing then, because our customers, if they're told 2 days and then have to wait 3 for a response, then that would you're letting the customer down. That emotional kind of impact of not executing something by the actual deadline puts you on the back foot. So if you want to be proactive and start really reacting and managing those components better, having visualization on those differences is a fabulous way to do that. So, and it's just identifying whether you need to speed up the processes. And so maybe looking into then, well, why does it take us that 3rd day? Is it that something sits around and people aren't acting on it quickly enough? Or is it too short of a time estimation? We're trying to get too much done in too little of time. So that then that information gives you the power to start really looking at the processes that you have in place and managing these projects. So whilst looking at this in a table view can be helpful, and you might create another field to show you the formula difference of what's the difference between this date and this date, so that it's, again, easier just to calculate. I don't have that field available in here though, meaning I just haven't created it in the system, and we'll take a look at that in a moment. But if I want to start using this as a filter that I'm using regularly to report on, I can come to these actions and save this filter, and so then that way I don't have to run it over and over again. And an easy way to access that is just using these little carrots next to the main header line. So if I want to look at like opportunities, I know I have a bunch of filters under. So if I click on that drop down, I just then can quick access those filters. So if I wanted to see all of my in progress opportunities, I just click on that and it takes me to the opportunities list view page with all the applied criteria already. I'm not having to re-enter in that information, and it also confirms that I'm not using different fields compared to the last time I ran this report, which can be, even if it sounds silly, it can get confusing sometimes, making sure, well, what fields did I use last time? What was the exact order it was set up in? So when you save that filter, it does save your raw data table layout and your criteria components. But because we were looking at this sort of thing, maybe we want to look at this version not in a raw data table. We want to look at it in a better looking chart. So I want to look at columns, bars, line charts, pie charts, text charts. So even if I want to do something like a text chart, it's just I can use a count, a sum, an average of, or if I want to look at a column chart, maybe to look at all the different dates of projects that I had coming up in different months, or maybe a column chart to say, show me all the projects that are expected to close across a monthly breakdown. I can start building out those different functions with my X and Y axis based on the field values. And it really helps you then start depicting those projects and the differences of how you're executing on everything. And it just gives you a great way to visualize that data. So again, if we jump back to this dashboard, you can see the different kinds of reports that you have in here. So if I wanted to look at my different resources, so we're looking at reporting on resource allocation, I can see Natalie might have a ton of different projects going on right now, but Shannon and Yasmin could really take on a little bit more responsibility. Or maybe these are interns, and so we're keeping on the amount of work that they're allocated right now as minimal. Or maybe they're on holiday, and that's why they don't have as much projects going on right now. You can also look at this in a bar chart or column chart so that you can see it dispersed across this horizontally instead of vertically. So there's just different ways that you can start visualizing this data. Or if I wanted a count of all of the projects that are currently open, or projects that are expected to close today, or maybe a count of all the projects that are in critical status or at risk, you can start breaking that down. Another really popular widget that's used in the system is this workflow widget. So if I do have any project statuses or types of projects and things like that, I can start to look at the different stages as these projects move through them. So like we use that business rule to say, alert us when a project moves from one field value to another. I can then this is just a quick count so that I can see everything that's in a certain stage. So if I wanted to see everything that's waiting on sign off, I can just quick click into this, and then it takes me directly to a list of everything that's waiting for sign off. So if maybe I'm the person responsible for signing off on all completed projects, then I can click into that and confirm it's done. And maybe I use that as my workload. It's just a visualization. This can, let's say I also see that there's a bunch of tickets or projects that end up in the completed stage. I can get just a quick visualization knowing that, oh, I'm about to have a bunch of projects move into my status of waiting for sign off. So you can just get that kind of visualization on requirements right in front of your face, and it's quite easy to look at from that component. Here's an example of the workflow widget populated with data and how that looks. And again, when you click on this, it would take me to those 111 contacts. So lastly, we're going to, now that we've kind of touched base on all of the main bullet points, we're going to look at how are you actually building it out in the system, and that Salpo is, yes, a off-the-shelf product because we do have some modules that are templated, but really the whole entire system can be customized to work for how you need it to work with. An example being, like we were referencing before, that you can have projects built out for cake decoration, but then projects for IT building components. So you may be needing different fields and values. So none of this is standardized. You can completely customize what types of projects that you're building out, the date field, or like any of the types of fields that you're building within here. And this is all done from within the control panel. So if I wanted to create a category, maybe I wanted to start sectioning this off, I can create categories so that I have maybe business details as a category, and then I have a second category built out of just project information, and then a third category built out for scope creep information and how has this project scope expanded based off of the original requirements. And so there's different categories based off of the requirements within a project. But then if I want to start building out these different fields within here, I use that same add drop down and add these different fields in. So if I wanted to do this project type, you can see it's a select field. I would just press on select here, and then it fills out all the different field values that we have listed. Or it doesn't fill out. I manually add that information in by adding it in bulk, or I can add it in separately one by one, and just add those field values in. And you get to rearrange them, customize them, and everything. So it's completely up to you and the types of projects that you're using to really make sure that you get to plan and execute those projects, no matter how simple or complex they are, so that you can deliver them on time within the requirements listed and within budget. So if you have any questions and want to learn a little bit more about Salpo, or if you want to provide some feedback on what you got to see today, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. If you have some feedback, messaging our marketing@salpo.com team, or if you're currently in trial and have any questions, feel free to reach out to our support@salpo.com team. Realistically, reaching out to either team, though, a knowledgeable source will get back to you and assist. So if you have any questions, we look forward to hearing from you. Otherwise, thanks so much for attending today's webinar, and we'll speak soon.